Hello and welcome to System Configuration lesson. In this video we are going to take a look at system.xml and config.xml configuration files. Also we'll talk about assessing system configuration values. In Magento 2, system configuration can be populated using etc admin.html system.xml file. I have created a system.xml file for you and I will explain what I've done here. So the root node is config, the second node is system, and inside I created a new tab for system configuration. This tab is named mastering and should be located at the very bottom of system configuration. The label is translated when the location is switched. Also, I created a section named mastering as well, and this section is visible only in default scope. This section was added to mastering tab and was restricted for viewing only for users who have access to mastering sample module, mastering ACL resource. Inside this section I created a field set or a group called item creation by schedule. This group contains of two fields. The first field is a select that has basically two values, yes or no, and it's achieved by using Magento config model config source yes no source model. The label of this field is enabled, and the third order of this field is 10, that makes it before the second field with third order 20. The second field is cron expression. This field is of type text and has a label at item cron expression. So, as you might guess, I created this system configuration to manage the cron job we created earlier in this video set. And using this system configuration I will be able to specify the cron expression and enable or disable adding items by cron schedule. Now let's create the basic values for these configuration entries. To assess this configuration we have to remember the path for configuration value, and this path is created using section ID mastering. The second part of path is group ID general, and the third part of path is field ID. For the first it will be enabled, for the second it will be cron expression. So now we will specify default values for those fields. And for this purpose we will create config.xml file inside etc directory. The root node is config as usual. Now I would like to specify default values for default scope of system configuration. That's why I am creating default node and using the path from system.xml to specify the values. So the section ID is mastering, the group ID is general, and we have two fields. The first one is enabled and the second one called cron expression. Let's disable the functionality by default, and default cron expression will be 5 stars separated by spaces, which means cron expression will run each minute. Now we are going to use our configuration in the code. The cron expression can be used from cron configuration without any implementation on PHP side. So to use the configuration value for cron expression in cron tab configuration, we have just to open crontab.xml file and change the hard-coded schedule here to config path, and the path in our configuration, it will be mastering general cron expression separated by slashes. Now the job cron expression will be loaded from mastering general cron expression config value. However, we cannot enable or disable cron jobs from the cron configuration. That's why we have to create some implementation for this purpose. First, let's create a class that will provide us access to configuration values. And I would like to create it under model config.php. So I prepared a simple implementation of this class. Basically, you can access system configuration in Magento using Magento framework app config scope config interface. And as you can see, I am injecting this configuration interface using DI. I also created two constants to specify path for my fields in configuration. The first one is mastering general enabled. The second one is mastering general cron expression. However, as we used the cron expression configuration value directly in cron tab.xml, we can skip using this value here. And also, I implemented a function called isEnabled. This function will return the value of enabled config entry. For this purpose, I am accessing the scope config interface instance and getting value using the path stored in the constant. The last step is to use the isEnabled function return and create a specific condition for the cron job. So let's go to cron namespace, add item class, and restrict execution of execute function based off isEnabled condition. For this purpose, we'll create additional property in this class called config, and require a config our created config file to the constructor. We will use a short name in constructor and will specify the full path in uses. So it's mastering, sample model, model, config, and we'll assign config to config property of this class. Now in execute function we can add a condition. If this config is enabled, then we will add a scheduled item, and we'll do nothing if the config is disabled. That's it. Now let's take a look on configuration we created in admin panel. First thing, as usual, we are clearing cache. Now we go to admin panel of our Magento installation. I'm using credentials from installation. Finally, the system configuration in Magento 2 is located under Stores, Settings, Configuration. Now let's find our tab. And here it is. It wasn't the last tab, probably because Services and Advanced tabs has bigger sort order. However, we have our tab, our section, our field set, and two fields. As you can see, the value enabled and cron expression are pre-populated from config.xml file. Now we can enable the configuration and change cron expression, like running each 5 minutes instead of 1 minute. And we'll save this configuration. When this configuration is saved, values are saved to database and they are loaded from database instead of config.xml file. Thank you for your attention and see you in the next video. Web API implementation.